Hey, this is Matt once again. Welcome back to the video. This is a paid request for Richard. For those interested in requesting pretty much any type of videos or topics, reactions, commentaries, what have you, feel free to send it either directly to my PayPal or join my Patreon. Both links are down below in the info box, and I will promise that I will try to get to it and upload it as soon as I can. That's why I upload like 3, 4, 5 videos a day. I know it's a lot, but I don't like when people have to wait for stuff, and I'm trying my best. It's the least I could do when someone is paying me money. But a lot of you guys have been very nice about it. I appreciate that. But again, I hate making people wait. I know it's not the best quality of videos. It's definitely no HD around here. It's more 240p from 1985, but you work with what you got when you're in the middle of nowhere with satellite internet. That's the shits, to be honest. Pure shits. But anyway, this is a review of The Shootist with John Wayne. Actually, it was the last film John Wayne did before he passed away. Which is very... This film was not the most exciting film, and it's probably not as deep as I thought it was. But I still liked it because it was an interesting epilogue for John Wayne's career. Now, I didn't grow with John Wayne like other people did, although I know nowadays he gets canceled because he's this, this, and this, which, wow, thank God he's not alive to be able to defend himself, right? But, like I said, I'm not the biggest Western guy. If I did grow with Westerns, it was with Young Guns, with Emilio Estevez, maybe some Clint Eastwood stuff. But there were John Wayne films I remember watching. A couple years ago I saw Rio Bravo. I really enjoyed that one. I vaguely remember the Green Berets. I remember the song. And here and there. Now, this is at a time when he went through a few years where he had cancer. Now, at the time he was making this, I believe it was thought that he had kicked it. I mean, there was some kind of surgery, and I think even some ribs were removed, but it seemed like at the time he kicked it. But then a few years later, it came back, and I think later that year, and I want to say 79, he passed away in 1979. Forgive me if I get the details wrong. I believe that cancer was brought about by that Genghis Khan movie he did, and I forget what the movie was called, but it was where he played Genghis Khan. If I understand, like, unbeknownst to them, they were, or at least some of them, maybe some of them knew, they were shooting like near a site that was radioactive, and apparently a lot of people who were involved with that shoot, they later on they did cancer, which is pretty fucked up, pretty sad. But this one, I mean, not only do you have John Wayne, you have Ron Howard, fairly young Ron Howard. You have Jimmy Stewart. You have Scatman Crothers from The Shining. Lauren Bacall. Yeah, some familiar faces in there. And pretty much John Wayne, he's a gunfighter. The version I saw, I don't know, there's different versions. I say that because it looked like it was edited a bit clunky, so I don't know if it's just the version I saw, but it shows old footage of some of his older black and white movies, sort of his history throughout the years. I say clunky because the version I saw, it seemed like the music would cut out, but maybe that's not the movie idea. Maybe it's just bad quality I saw it in. But pretty much showing his history as a gunfighter, and he goes into town and he sees his buddy Jimmy Stewart, and Jimmy Stewart gives him the news that this character is dying from stuff like cancer. It was very, again, reminiscent of the... It's kind of an eerie film to watch because it's reminiscent of how John Wayne got the news in the past, and then this is how he ended up dying just a few years later, and this character, in a way, almost seemed as if John Wayne deep down knew this might be the last film he does. So he's an aging guy who has one last gunfight in him, and he's gonna. Does he want to die of cancer? Does he want to go out in a little bit of blaze of glory? Maybe teach someone a thing or two. It's one of those things that the film is worth the watch, if nothing else, for John Wayne's performance. Because it's very easy to say, oh, John Wayne always gave the same performance. And they would have a point. I mean, John Wayne was a character unto himself. The swagger, the voice, the bravado, his taste in movies. I know he was not a fan of Clint Eastwood and his westerns in comparison to the westerns he did. He was a very, very patriotic guy. Like I said, I'm not a connoisseur in John Wayne. I know little bits and pieces, but not a ton of stuff. But he was definitely a character unto himself. And I think at one point he did get an Oscar win or a nomination, one as True Grit, that movie. And maybe he was trying for a little bit of that in this, where maybe he would finally get some recognition in terms of acting. It's a little bit more to John Wayne's performance in this. He's willing to let himself seem tired. I mean, hell, there's even a bit where off-screen he slips in a bathtub and he lets Bacall pick him up and tear him to the bed. This is a guy that you see is on the way out and he wants to enjoy and teach a bit of life before that happens. Now, it's not a perfect film. I don't think it's that exciting of a film. He pretty much comes into town. He wants to stay at this lodge held by Lauren Bacall, whose son is played by Ron Howard, a teenage Ron Howard. So it was probably around the time of like American Graffiti and these other stuff he was doing. And he finds out John Wayne is this famous gunfighter, and he's, wow, and wants to be taught some stuff, until eventually John Wayne does teach him a little bit of shooting, among other things. Bacall doesn't like that, but you get this kind of growing friendship that starts with animosity, but then becomes a bit closer throughout the movie between John Wayne and Lauren Bacall. And John Wayne, I think he does a really good job. I agree with Quentin Tarantino. He said, actually agree with Foley. He said, this is a film that you've seen done better, and the gunfights and other stuff, you've seen done better and done deeper, but it's worth a watch because of John Wayne. It's his last performance, and then some of the other supporting actors, like Ron Howard, like Jimmy Stewart and others. It's worth a watch for that alone. I'm not big on the music. Like, the beginning of the film is trying to be very broad and big, and I think if it was a bit more melancholy, a bit wistful, a bit quieter, a bit not ponderous, that's the wrong word, but just a bit more subtle. I think that would work better. Maybe a little bit more somber. Kind of wistful of the days of before and sort of things coming to an end for this character. And Sally, as we come to find out, to John Wayne himself. Now, it's directed by Don Siegel, who I believe he did Dirty Harry with Clint Eastwood, among other movies. And despite what some people said, I know he said, you know, we had differences between the two, but ultimately we did get along. And like I said, it's not the most exciting film, and it's not deep like Unforgiven. Maybe a tad of it wants to be a teeny bit like eventually we see in Clint Eastwood's Unforgiven, but that was done at such higher level compared to this. And in a way, like, you kind of see, if you want to see the difference between the two, you look at this film, you look at Unforgiven, and just the different moods and different feels of both movies. And both of their penultimate final westerns. Because, yeah, I don't think Eastwood ever did another western since Unforgiven, from what I remember. And it's not action-packed. I mean, there's a little bit at the beginning where someone tries to rob him and he wounds the guy. There's a bit when he's in Lauren Bacall's lodge and someone tries to shoot him, and it's not the most exciting in terms of staging. You get a little bit of that old school when someone shoots and someone gets shot in the head. It looks like someone got shot with paintball, but it's meant to elicit a headshot. Although I still prefer that than CGI, so I'll give you that. Gives a little bit of sense of more violence compared to older John Wayne films. But he said the cast. It was nice to see Jimmy Stewart in one of his later roles. I think by this point he had gone a little bit deaf, so sometimes he wasn't taking as many roles as possible because he had a bit hard of hearing. But John Wayne, hey Jimmy, can you do me a favor on this, since they had worked together before and other stuff. So it was nice to see Jimmy Stewart in there. Again, Ron Howard. This is before director Ron Howard. This is, again, after Andy Griffith's show. This is him doing American Graffiti and other stuff. So I had heard of the Shootist, but I didn't know the details. So I'm like, oh shit, Ron Howard is in this? Of course, go on to direct Apollo 13, Backdraft, Ransom, and a variety of other movies. He does a good job as a guy that's in awe of this guy, John Wayne, but he's not annoying or irritating either. Scatman Crothers, he was the guy helping the little kid with The Shining, and he tries to save the day, but Jack Nicholson gives him a big old axe to, hello there, here's an axe. There's no Scatman Crothers. He takes care of the horses. And it's pretty much just John Wayne just dealing with Lauren Bacall, dealing with Ron Howard, and also kind of a guy trying to dot the I's and cross the T's on the end of his life. He knows he doesn't have much time. I can't do a John Wayne impression, but I'll try. I want to see hills and sky. I don't want to see them alone. I've been full of alone lately. Which I like that line. That line just hit me. I don't know why. I've been full of alone lately. Maybe because it's just no one else would say it that way except John Wayne. Maybe because all of us have felt that way in some way, shape, or form. That we've been full of alone lately. And they kind of cemented what kind of character this was. And hell, you could say this character, if he had changed his name, could have been a number of characters John Wayne had played back in the day, but this was his final days. Or him dealing with this girl that he liked, and he was thinking maybe we could get married, but she's like, well, you know what, this guy wants to do this book on you, and he's like, well, wait a minute, he doesn't know anything about me. Well, yeah, he would just, make some stuff up and be exciting. No, man should be allowed his human dignity. You're two sides of a counterfeit coin. I'll not be remembered for a pack of lies. And she gets pissed, and you realize she was in it more for money she could make in the future and less about John Wayne. So, it's one of the most vulnerable you would see John Wayne. Like I said, there's a point where he needs help out of a tub, and Lauren Bacall is helping him out. And I like this change where she's like, you swear too much, and he's like, the hell I do. So it's I wouldn't put up there with the few I've seen as like one of the best John Wayne films, but easily one of his better performances. Again, I wish maybe there was John Wayne can only do so much, granted, with his age and size. Maybe if some more action scenes were peppered throughout and had a little bit more zing to them. Maybe there was a bit more scenes of contemplation. like you would eventually see in Unforgiven. Maybe there's some bigger, uh, thorough story pattern where there's these bad guys who maybe has a history of John Wayne, and you kind of see a bit more of them, and then like John Wayne seeing how these guys are, and maybe these guys are how he used to be, or he's like, because his decision almost feels out of nowhere in a way, because there's spoiler at the end of the film. Something arrives. It's his gravestone. His birth is there, but his death has been filled in. He has a celebration. He wants to have a drink. He goes to a bar. He pretty much says, "Hey, get 3 really tough, dangerous guys." But they seem like guys that are random, and there's no history, or these guys are terrorizing the town. He wants to do one last good thing. It almost seems like random that it happens. And like I say, these 3, you don't really get much of these guys screen time wise. So then when John Wayne has this final conversation with these 3 guys in a bar, I guess it's more of, if this guy's going to go, he's going to go out in a blaze of glory, not whittle away. And I'm saying, maybe we could get a few more vulnerable scenes, or a bit more contemplative scenes with him and Ron Howard, which could really shed some emotion into the camera, and or something like that. Maybe they could have helped that be stronger of a film, of a emotional feeling throughout it. Or again, if the villains were a bit more built up, and okay, this is him, do or die. Maybe a bit more emotional. There's somewhat connection between him and Ron Howard, but I think you could have pushed even more of some emotional connection. Maybe this is a son he never had, push more into that, or maybe develop more of a son that maybe he had and died, and he lives to this kid, and they could have pushed a lot of that stuff more. But then, spoilers, he fights the 3 in the bar. Again, it's not as exciting as other ones, but it's okay. There's one guy he shoots over here. There's one guy who picks up a table as a shield, and he's able to shoot through the table. There's another guy that he sees a reflection, gets on the ground, is able to shoot him in the head. But lo and behold, Ron Howard gets in. A bartender's going to shoot John Wayne in the back. Does it. Ron Howard gets pissed, shoots the bartender, then throws the gun away, realizing this isn't for him. John Wayne smiles because he doesn't want Ron Howard to go down that path, and then he dies. So yeah, it is one of those sad, weird, eerie things that the last John Wayne film is one that he dies. But it had to be shot in the back, because no one's going to take John Wayne in a fair fight. So maybe there's still that part of him that he was able to be a bit more vulnerable, but not too far. And because of that, you're able to sadly not get a bit more meat in the matter from this film that you could have. But yeah, I mean, it's like I said, there's a sense of melancholy when you watch it, where the last film John Wayne did is one that he dies at the end, and that his character got cancer, and he's either going to whittle away or go out in a blaze of glory, which he does, and he's able to take 3 dangerous guys out. There's not much development on those guys, except one of them, I think, killed someone when the people were playing cards and stuff, but it's nowhere up to level Unforgiven and other westerns. But like I said, it's an interesting watch to see a bit of a different type of John Wayne role. So, like I said, I like the bits between him and Lauren Bacall. I like the bits between him and Ron Howard. There's not much action. Like I said, there's only a few little spurts here and there. I think there's stuff they could have pushed a bit more in terms of development, but overall, it was definitely worth a watch to see how this guy's career ended. This was his last tip of the hat. I think he did okay business. Got some decent reviews. And yeah, you've seen this stuff done better. You've seen this stuff done grander and deeper, but it's still John Wayne's final performance, and as a tired, sick individual who wants to get the last bits of his life as much as he can. And an ode to John Wayne. The Duke. I don't mean a number one from Stiff, New York, but the Duke. He's still the Duke. With that said, thanks for watching. We'll see you guys later. Bye-bye.